There is a peculiar kind of silence that lingers in the places where people vanish. It does not arrive all at once. It seeps into the walls. It hangs in the air like dust that will not settle. And it grows heavier each day that a body is not found, each hour that a phone does not ring, each minute that a message is not answered. The silence of the missing does not sound like any ordinary quiet. It is jagged, unsteady, the absence of footsteps where footsteps should be, the click of a keyboard that never came, the car that never returned to its driveway. For years, people believed the internet was a threshold that would free them, a place where borders dissolved and human connection multiplied without end. Craigslist was born from that belief, a blank digital marketplace where words were currency and strangers were potential allies, buyers, sellers, even friends. Furniture could be exchanged for a few bills. Apartments could be rented with a handshake. Jobs could appear like promises waiting to be fulfilled. All it required was trust, a fragile bond woven only through text on a screen. But trust can be a kind of blindness, a doorway left unlatched, a hand extended in the dark. And what is offered in that darkness does not always resemble what was promised. The first horror story always begins the same way, with something ordinary. A listing for a car that seemed too good to ignore, a couch offered for free if you could pick it up, an invitation to meet at a coffee shop that never felt unusual until the second chair was missing. These were not extraordinary events. They were the daily exchanges that millions of people believed were safe. They were the everyday rituals of modern life, until they were not. There are stories whispered now of doors closing when they should not have, of engines that roared alive at night when they should have been silent. Stories of a figure waiting in a parking lot long after the hour agreed upon, or a living room where 2 cups of coffee cooled, one never touched. And then there are the stories that have no ending at all because the people who could have told them never came back. Think of this. A message is sent. "I am here." Another follows a moment later. "Where are you?" The typing bubble flickers once, twice, then disappears. No reply. The chat remains frozen on the screen long after the phone has been abandoned. What happens in that silence? What can truly be waiting behind a stranger's smile, or in the shadows of an unfamiliar apartment? When the only thread tying 2 people together is a promise written in plain text, how much of it can be trusted? The internet does not breathe. It does not think, it does not care. It merely connects. But those who wait behind those connections, those who watch and answer, some are hunters who have learned that the easiest prey are the ones who come willingly, carrying their own trust like an offering. Police reports speak of these encounters with the same sterile language they always use. Meeting arranged. Victim arrived. Contact lost. But the reality is more human, more fragile. A last glance in a mirror before leaving. A family member waiting for a return that never comes. A car parked neatly at the edge of a street, its doors locked, its keys gone. There is an unsettling truth beneath all of this. You will never really know who has written those words on the screen. You will never truly know who sits at the other end of the conversation, who is waiting where they say they are, who has been watching your words with intentions unspoken. It is easier, perhaps, to believe that the worst of these stories are exaggerated, that they are urban legends told by those who thrive on fear. But there are mothers who never heard their children's voices again. There are fathers who traced phone records across counties only to discover nothing but dead ends. There are police officers who walked through empty homes, calling names into rooms that no one would ever answer. This is what Craigslist became for them. Not a marketplace, not a community, but a threshold, a silent trap disguised as ordinary life. The stories you are about to hear are not inventions. They are not works of fiction meant to entertain. They are threads of reality frayed and left behind by those who stepped into a meeting they believed was safe, by those who trusted that strangers were nothing more than what they claimed to be. These are stories written not on paper but on the hollow silence of absence, on the grief of families who still wait for doors to open, who still check their phones for a call that will never come. And so the question lingers, heavier than the silence itself. How much do you trust the stranger you plan to meet tomorrow? How certain are you that the hand extended toward you is not a trap disguised as kindness? That the couch waiting in a dimly lit apartment is not the last thing you will ever see? Some encounters lead to laughter, to handshakes, to money exchanged and lives moving forward. But some end in places no one can imagine. In basements that should never be entered. In forests where the ground is disturbed, where shoes are left without feet to fill them. in apartments where the air still carries the faint trace of someone who will never return. The silence that follows is endless. And tonight, in the flickering glow of your screen, you will hear 3 of those silences. 3 Craigslist encounters that began with ordinary trust and ended with horror. Are you certain the stranger you trust tomorrow is who they say they are? In the early years of Craigslist, there was a kind of optimism that pulsed through its endless pages. The world was shifting from printed classifieds taped to telephone poles, from neighborhood bulletin boards littered with curled paper edges, into a new form of connection that lived inside a glowing screen. The internet was no longer a curiosity. It was becoming a daily companion. And Craigslist, stripped of bright colors, advertisements, or polished design, felt honest. Its very plainness convinced people that it could be trusted. Communities flocked to it. Some searched for jobs, desperate for a paycheck that could keep a roof overhead. Others posted ads for roommates seeking someone they could split the rent with, perhaps even share a friendship. Many scrolled through the furniture listings, finding tables, chairs, beds, and couches that carried the life of one home into another. At its core, it was simple. If you needed something, you could find it. If you had something, you could give it away. It was ordinary. It was unremarkable. And that was exactly what made it so dangerous. Behind every ad, behind every offer and request was a person, or at least the appearance of one, a name typed into a message, a phone number exchanged, a location offered. Most of them were genuine, but not all, and the plainness of Craigslist made it impossible to tell the difference. There was no system of verification, no layer of protection, no barrier between one soul and another, only trust. People carried that trust into empty parking lots, into apartments they had never visited before, into cars parked under dim lights, into neighborhoods they did not know. They brought it with them in the form of a smile, a handshake, a willingness to believe that what had been promised online would match the reality in front of them. But trust is fragile. It can be bent, reshaped, turned against the one who carries it. It is easy now, with hindsight, to question why so many people allowed themselves to step into the unknown with such little hesitation. But in those years, the internet was still draped in a kind of innocence. It was a place of discovery, not of suspicion. There was an unspoken belief that the world was moving toward something better, and that strangers could be opportunities rather than threats. No one wanted to imagine the possibility that danger could be waiting in the very places that look so ordinary, so harmless. The families of those who later disappeared often spoke of this trust with a kind of broken disbelief. They remembered the eagerness of their loved ones preparing to leave the house. A daughter who slipped her shoes on quickly because the drive would not take long. A son who promised he would be home before dark. A father who told his children he was just picking something up, that he would be back in an hour. These were not people chasing danger. They were not walking into shadows knowingly. They were simply living, carrying out ordinary transactions that millions of others had completed without consequence. The pain of these families rests not only in the loss, but in the ordinariness of it all. How could something as simple as a classified ad, as harmless as a text message arranging a meeting, unravel into silence, into grief, into the unending absence of someone who never returned? Communities began to shift in the wake of these disappearances. The once bustling pages of Craigslist started to feel different, more sinister, even when nothing appeared out of place. People read ads more carefully. They questioned why a couch would be free, why a car would be listed for so little, why someone would insist on meeting late at night or in a place that was not crowded. Fear crept in quietly. Conversations between neighbors turned cautious, muttered in low voices about the risks of trusting a stranger who promised something that seemed too good to be true. The truth is that Craigslist was never truly dangerous on its own. It was only a reflection, a mirror that showed the desires and desperation of ordinary people. And in that reflection, predators found something they had never been given before, a direct doorway into the lives of those who trusted too easily. They no longer needed to stalk alleys, linger in bars, or hunt in parking lots. They could sit behind a screen, type a few words, and wait for someone to come to them. The shadow of this truth spread quietly, hidden beneath the everyday exchanges. Most transactions remained harmless. Most people returned home, but the stories of those who did not became louder than the thousands of safe encounters. And once those stories began to circulate, once families and communities whispered them in the dark, The innocence of Craigslist could not be restored. In the corners of the internet, forums erupted with warnings. Do not go alone. Do not meet at night. Do not give your address. Some people listened. Others dismissed the warnings as paranoia, believing the dangers were rare, exaggerated. But every new case, every fresh disappearance pressed heavier against the belief that these were nothing more than isolated tragedies. Patterns emerged. Shadows grew longer. The stories that linger, the ones you will soon hear, are not tales of misfortune alone. They are reminders of how fragile safety can be, how quickly it can be broken. They reveal the dangers that wait when trust is offered blindly, when caution is replaced with eagerness, when a stranger's words are taken at face value, and they remind us of something far colder, far more unsettling. That Craigslist was never just a marketplace. It was never just a platform for exchange. It was a hunting ground, and for some who entered it, the act of trust was not only dangerous, it was fatal. The pages of Craigslist are still there. The ads still scroll endlessly, and with them comes a question that lingers like a shadow cast across every word written, every offer posted, every message sent. Who is really waiting on the other side? It began with something so simple, so common, that no one who heard the story later could believe how it ended. A used car posted for sale on Craigslist. The ad itself was unremarkable, just a few photographs taken in the fading light of a driveway, the kind that carried shadows along the edges of the frame. The words were direct, almost careless. Reliable, cheap, needs to go fast. The price was lower than expected, but not enough to raise suspicion. For many, a deal like this was the kind of small miracle Craigslist was built for. He had been searching for weeks, scrolling through listings that either demanded too much money or looked too broken to trust. This one felt different, honest, simple. He reached out. The response came quickly. A man's voice on the other end of the line, steady, calm, polite. He said he was moving out of state, could not take the car with him, needed it gone quickly. The arrangement was made easily. A time, a place, a parking lot outside a quiet strip mall where businesses closed early. The day of the meeting was unremarkable. The air was cool, the streets busy with people going about their evenings. Nothing about the moment seemed wrong. He told his roommate where he was going, promised to be back before long. He carried cash in his pocket, folded carefully, counted twice before he left. There was no sense of danger, only eagerness, a chance to finally end the weeks of searching. When he arrived, the lot was nearly empty. A few scattered cars sat in silence, their windows catching the dim reflection of the streetlights overhead. The car from the ad was there. At least it looked like it. The same faded color, the same dent near the bumper. But something about it felt different. The way it sat too far from the main road. The way the shadows wrapped tightly around it. The seller stepped out. At first glance he seemed ordinary. A jacket zipped up to his neck. A face that could not be remembered clearly afterward, as though it was built to be forgettable. He smiled. He spoke politely just as he had on the phone. The exchange began. Questions about the car. The hood lifted, the engine shone. A few jokes about the dent. Nothing unusual. But as minutes passed, the details began to twist. The man avoided certain questions. He could not recall when the car had last been serviced. He hesitated when asked about ownership papers, fumbling through his words as if rehearsed but incomplete. And then there was the way his eyes shifted. Not at the car, not at the buyer, but toward the edges of the lot, as if waiting for something or someone. The unease grew, quiet but undeniable. Yet it was covered, smoothed over by the normalcy of the transaction. A car, a price, a seller, a buyer. He told himself not to overthink, not to assume the worst. After all, people were cautious with strangers. Perhaps the man was nervous too. The last message he sent that night read simply, "Here now. Looks fine." It was delivered at 8:43 p.m. His phone never sent another. When his roommate called an hour later, there was no answer. 2 hours later, still nothing. The night stretched thin, filled with silence where footsteps should have returned, where a car should have pulled into the driveway. By morning, worry had hardened into fear. His car keys were still on the counter. His jacket was still hanging by the door. The only thing missing was him. Police retraced his steps quickly. The message log showed the exchange. The number he had called the night before rang endlessly without response. The parking lot was searched, every inch of it scanned for signs of struggle, for tire tracks, for anything. Nothing. The car in the ad could not be found. The photographs disappeared from the listing, erased as if they had never been there. The post was deleted, vanishing into the endless turnover of Craigslist ads, leaving no trace of the man who had created it. Witnesses offered little. A store clerk remembered seeing two men near a car in the lot, but could not describe them in detail. Another recalled a vehicle idling at the far edge of the road, headlights off, engine barely audible. But no one saw what happened after. No one saw where he went or who he left with. The contradictions only deepened the unease. His phone, when traced, had gone dark within minutes of the last message. The tower records placed him near the lot, but not beyond it. It was as if he had been swallowed by the place, erased the moment he stepped too far from the safety of the road. His family clung to hope. Perhaps he had gone with the seller somewhere else to finish paperwork. Perhaps his phone had died, his car had broken down. Perhaps there was an explanation that would surface soon. But each day that passed without word chipped away at those possibilities until all that was left was silence. And in that silence, questions grew. Who had placed the ad? Where had the car gone? Why had he been chosen out of the thousands scrolling through Craigslist that week? No one could answer. The platform carried no memory of its own. Ads vanished as quickly as they appeared. Numbers could be discarded, emails abandoned. The digital trail was thinner than smoke. The parking lot remained. Ordinary by day, unsettling by night. People began to whisper about it, driving past but never stopping, glancing at the space where the car had once waited like a lure. They wondered if danger lingered there still, if the ground itself remembered what had happened, even if no one else could say. What began as an ordinary listing had twisted into something unexplainable, something that gnawed at the edges of reality. One moment, a man walked into the glow of a streetlight to meet a stranger. The next, he was gone, and in the gap between those moments lies a mystery that has never been solved. The disappearance was not immediate in the eyes of the authorities. At first, it was categorized as routine. A young man failed to return home, his phone went dark. His last known location was a parking lot that bore no signs of violence. In the beginning, cases like these are filed quietly, treated as misunderstandings or voluntary absence, but the days that followed carved those doubts into something much darker. Detectives began with the evidence that was tangible. The last messages exchanged through Craigslist were recovered. The ad itself, however, was gone, vanished from the site as though it had never existed. Craigslist had always been transient by design. Listings expired, users deleted posts, data disappeared. It made recovery nearly impossible. All investigators had were the fragments. Screenshots saved in a roommate's phone, showing the faded car, the dented bumper, the words reliable, cheap, needs to go fast. It was a digital ghost, more absence than presence, a record that refused to hold weight in the courtroom of reality. The phone records were the next lead. His device had pinged off a nearby tower at precisely 8:44 p.m., only 1 minute after his final message. Here now. Looks fine. The signal lasted for less than 2 minutes before it ceased entirely. No slow drain of battery, no gradual weakening of reception. It had been cut. Whether by choice or by force, no one could say. Witness statements, as always, blurred the edges of truth. A clerk at the corner store remembered 2 men near a car, but the details shifted each time he repeated them. First, the seller wore a jacket. Later, it was a hoodie. The car was pale in one telling, darker in another. Fear reshaped memory until nothing was certain. Another witness claimed to have seen a vehicle parked near the edge of the lot, headlights off, engine idling low. But when pressed, he admitted he could not be sure of the make, the model, or even the color. Only the impression of unease lingered, a detail as intangible as the silence that followed. There were no cameras in the lot. No traffic lights nearby to capture the moment. The shadows consumed the event in its entirety, offering no reflection, no proof. Detectives interviewed friends and family, searching for motive in the victim's life, for reasons he might have chosen to vanish on his own. But his life was steady, almost painfully ordinary. He worked, he paid bills, he planned for the future. There was no debt, no addiction, no secret double life. His only mistake was trust. Attention turned then to the seller. The number used to arrange the meeting was traced. It had been purchased weeks earlier with prepaid credit, no contract, no identification, only cash exchanged at a convenience store. By the time investigators reached it, the number was already dead. No further calls, no new registrations, just a hollow line. The email address attached to the Craigslist account offered no more. It was built with the same precision of disappearance. A name that was not a name. A string of numbers without meaning. The IP address, when tracked, led only to a public Wi-Fi network at a fast food restaurant, a place where countless devices had connected and disconnected, blurring identity into dust. Every lead fractured into nothing. Every clue dissolved the moment it was touched. And yet fragments remained, strange and unexplainable. On the night of the disappearance, a car matching the description of the one in the ad was seen on a nearby road, parked briefly on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing. A passerby recalled the image, but when questioned, admitted they never saw anyone inside. By the time police canvassed the area, no vehicle remained. The detail lodged itself into the record, unprovable but unsettling. Theories emerged among investigators. Some believed the encounter had been a robbery that spiraled out of control. The victim carried cash, and the seller had seen it as opportunity. But if robbery was the motive, where was the body? Where was the car? Why erase all traces instead of leaving the scene behind? Others suggested something more deliberate. A predator using Craigslist not for money but for the hunt. A lure disguised as a transaction, a pattern that might extend further than this one case. Journalists who followed the story unearthed older disappearances with eerie similarities. A man searching for construction tools vanished after arranging a Craigslist sale. A woman seeking a cheap couch never returned from the address she had been given. In each case, the ads disappeared swiftly. The contact information evaporated. The trail ended in silence. Coincidence, perhaps, or a pattern. Psychologists brought into the discussion offered a colder interpretation. They spoke of the kind of individuals drawn to anonymous platforms. Those who find power in deception, who study the weaknesses of strangers, who thrive in the gap between digital trust and physical vulnerability. Craigslist, they argued, was not just a marketplace. It was a stage where masks could be worn without question, where predators could rewrite themselves endlessly. For the family, none of this mattered. Theories did not fill the empty chair at the table. Evidence did not bring back the sound of footsteps in the hall. Each new fragment only deepened the wound, reminding them of how easily someone could vanish into the machinery of the internet, leaving behind nothing but unanswered messages and a silence that stretched into years. The case remained open, but it drifted, as so many cases do, into the territory of uncertainty. Files collected dust. Leads ran cold. The world moved on, though the family did not. They kept the screenshots, the final message, the memory of a man who had left to buy a car and never returned. And the questions remain, fragile as glass yet sharp enough to cut. Who was the seller? Was there ever truly a car? Was the meeting a robbery gone wrong or something far darker? A ritual of disappearance repeated again and again beneath the surface of ordinary life. There are no answers. Only fragments. Only contradictions. Only silence. And silence, once it begins, does not end. There are tragedies that tear lives apart with violence so obvious that no one can look away. And then there are those that work more slowly, hollowing out the people left behind, reshaping them day by day with the absence of answers. This disappearance belonged to the second kind. His family lived for weeks inside a kind of half-light, caught between disbelief and dread. The chair at the table remained empty, but no one dared to move it. His room stayed untouched, the sheets unwashed, the air still faintly carrying his scent. Every vibration of a phone made hearts leap, only to sink when it was not him. Every knock at the door felt like it might be his return, but the door never opened and the silence thickened with every passing hour. Sleep became shallow, fragile. His mother spoke of waking in the night to the sound of footsteps in the hall, rushing to find nothing there. His father found himself staring at the driveway long after midnight, convinced he would see headlights swing across the windows. The mind becomes cruel in these moments. It plays the sound of keys at the door, the echo of laughter down the hallway, the shape of a shadow where none should be. And when reality reasserts itself, when the silence proves once again that he is gone, the devastation is sharper than before. For the community, The fear spread like a stain. At first, people whispered about the Craigslist ad as though it were an isolated mistake. A rare misfortune, tragic but unrepeatable. But then the story deepened, reaching others who remembered similar encounters. People spoke of meetings in dimly lit lots that suddenly felt sinister in hindsight, of conversations that ended abruptly, of sellers or buyers who behaved strangely. The disappearances did not belong to one man alone. They became the shadow hanging over anyone who had ever trusted a stranger through a screen. The fear shifted ordinary life in small but piercing ways. Neighbors who once shared cups of sugar or borrowed tools began locking their doors earlier, refusing to answer knocks at night. Parents warned their children with a new urgency, telling them never to go alone, never to meet someone without a witness, never to trust an ad that seemed too generous. The very fabric of trust in the community began to fray. People deleted their listings. Others swore they would never use Craigslist again. But the paranoia was not so easily contained. It reached into the daily rituals of life. A knock at the door from a delivery driver felt different. A phone call from an unfamiliar number made the heart race. Even grocery store parking lots, brightly lit, filled with shoppers, carried a faint edge of unease. Danger no longer lived in shadowed alleys or abandoned buildings. It lived in the everyday. It lived in the possibility that any stranger could be the one who was waiting, hunting, hiding their intent behind ordinary words. For the family, grief did not move in a straight line. It spiraled. There were days of anger, when they demanded answers from detectives who had none. Days of despair when they sat in silence, unwilling to speak the name of the one who was gone. And there were days of cruel hope, when rumors of sightings reached them, when strangers called to say they thought they had seen him walking in another city, another state. Each hope ended in ashes. Each false lead widened the wound. Psychologists describe this kind of grief as ambiguous loss, the kind that offers no body to bury, no closure, no end. It is the kind of pain that never allows healing, because the mind refuses to stop searching. His mother admitted years later that she still turned her head when passing through crowded spaces, scanning faces for a glimpse of him. His father confessed that he still listened for the sound of his son's voice in recordings, replaying them until they blurred into static. The absence became a presence, filling every space of their lives with something heavier than death itself. Friends felt the fracture as well. Some spoke of guilt, wondering if they should have gone with him that night, if their presence might have changed what happened. Others withdrew into silence, unable to bear the weight of the unanswered questions. The community gatherings held in his name became smaller as time passed, until only the family remained, standing alone with candles that flickered against the cold night air. The psychological toll reached even those who had no direct connection to him. The story spread online, a warning told in forums and whispered in comment threads. People wrote of their own encounters, times when a meeting had felt wrong, when they had walked away at the last moment. Each confession carried the same undercurrent of fear. It could have been me. What makes these stories so devastating is not only the disappearance itself, but the way it corrodes the simplest parts of human life. Trust, connection, the belief that most people are good, that most encounters are safe. When that is stripped away, what remains is suspicion, isolation, the haunting knowledge that danger does not always look like danger. Sometimes it looks like a bargain, a handshake, a smile offered too easily. Years later, the community still carried the scar. Parents taught their children to fear what once felt ordinary. Adults second-guessed every interaction with strangers. Craigslist remained, the ads still scrolling endlessly, but for many it was no longer a marketplace. It was a reminder that trust could be broken in the space of a heartbeat, that a single meeting could unravel a life, that silence could stretch across years and never loosen its grip. The impact of his disappearance was not measured only in police reports or media coverage. It was measured in the quiet moments, the untouched dinner plates, the voicemail boxes replayed until voices cracked, the empty spaces in family photographs. It was measured in the way neighbors spoke to one another, in the fear that lived in their eyes, in the way people hesitated before answering a stranger's message. It is easy to believe that grief fades with time, that fear lessens as distance grows. But for those who lived through it, the wound remains open, raw, unhealed. For them, every unanswered question, every absence, every silence is a reminder that someone walked out of a parking lot one night and never came back. And the silence has only deepened. When a disappearance refuses to resolve, when time stretches without answers, the human mind begins to search for patterns. The investigators did the same. They sifted through records, chased fragments of data, pieced together timelines that always seemed to fray at the edges. And yet, for every path pursued, the case doubled back on itself, leaving only speculation. Theories formed like cracks in glass, spreading outward, never mending. The first theory was the most ordinary, the one investigators reach for instinctively: robbery. He had carried cash with him that night, a significant amount folded neatly in his pocket. Perhaps the seller never intended to exchange a car. Perhaps the meeting was a lure designed only to draw him out, to strip him of what he carried and leave him behind. But the theory dissolved almost immediately under scrutiny. No body was found. No wallet, no phone, no sign of struggle. If robbery was the intent, why not leave him behind? Why erase every trace as though he had never existed? The second theory was darker: predation. The idea that Craigslist had become a hunting ground for individuals who sought not money but something far more unsettling. A predator could craft an identity, lure a stranger into an isolated meeting, and remove them from the world with terrifying precision. This theory drew strength from the patterns unearthed in other cities. Ads that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Meetings arranged in places just out of sight. Disappearances that left no trail. Some investigators whispered of a repeat offender, someone who understood how to use anonymity as a weapon, but without evidence it remained only suspicion. Then came the third theory, one that grew louder in the absence of answers: organized crime. Some believed the car in the ad was never meant to be sold, that it had been stolen or stripped down, bait for those desperate enough to respond. In this telling, his disappearance was not an isolated event but part of something larger. A network of individuals preying on Craigslist users for reasons far beyond money. Rumors spread of trafficking rings, of black markets hidden beneath the surface, of connections too dark to see clearly. These stories flourished in forums fueled by fear, but official reports rarely confirmed them. Yet the contradictions in the case kept investigators circling. Why had the seller deleted the ad so quickly? Why had the number gone dark within minutes? Of the meeting? Why had the car, captured in photographs, never been found again? Each piece suggested calculation, a deliberate effort to vanish without leaving a fingerprint. And that was perhaps the most haunting possibility: that the disappearance was not an accident, not even a crime of opportunity, but something carefully rehearsed, performed with precision. Journalists pushed deeper. They interviewed experts in digital forensics who explained how easy it was to erase a trail online. Prepaid phones, disposable emails, public Wi-Fi, all tools that allowed a person to become no one. To exist only for the hours required to arrange a meeting, then dissolve back into anonymity. For every step forward investigators took, the suspect had already taken 2 steps back, disappearing into shadows that left no shape. Conspiracy theorists took the absence of evidence and filled it with their own designs. Some claimed Craigslist itself was complicit, that the platform knew predators hid among its pages and chose silence over accountability. Others spun stranger tales, suggesting networks of individuals who traded victims like commodities, moving from city to city, ad to ad, erasing those who stumbled into their grasp. The theories became darker the further they reached, but none could be disproven entirely. The very absence of evidence became a kind of proof for those willing to believe. For the family, these theories offered little. Each one carried hope that the truth might finally emerge, but each one also demanded that they imagine darker and darker possibilities for what had happened. A robbery was brutal but simple. Predation was unbearable. Organized crime was endless, stretching their son's fate into something larger, something faceless. They clung to every possibility in turn, only to be left with the same silence. The case file grew thicker, pages of interviews, phone records, fragments of testimony, but its weight brought no resolution, Each new lead seemed promising until it unraveled. Each fresh theory left investigators with nothing solid to hold. In time, the theories themselves became the case. Not answers, but possibilities. Not closure, but shadows. What disturbed the community most was how easily this could happen again. The platform remained. Ads continued to appear and vanish. Strangers still met in dimly lit parking lots carrying cash, trusting in ordinary transactions. The investigation offered no reassurance. There were no suspects, no arrests, no clear warnings beyond the obvious. Do not meet strangers alone. Do not trust what you cannot verify. Do not step into the silence with someone you do not know. But fear is not enough to stop need. People continued to search Craigslist for jobs, for furniture, for cars, because life demands those things. And with every new meeting arranged, the possibility of another disappearance lingered, waiting quietly in the background. The most chilling theory, perhaps, was the one left unspoken in official reports, but whispered among investigators late, at night. What if the seller was not alone? What if the man who smiled in the parking lot was only the beginning, a lure designed to bring someone close while others waited just beyond the edge of sight? What if the idling car at the road's edge had been part of it all, headlights off, engine low, waiting for the moment when silence could swallow another life whole? Theories multiply when evidence vanishes, and in this case every theory pointed to the same truth. He was gone. Not by accident, not by mistake, but because someone had made him disappear, and that someone was never found. There is a peculiar cruelty in mysteries that remain unsolved. A crime with an answer can be mourned, can be processed, can be placed into the fragile category of the past. But a disappearance without resolution never truly settles. It lingers, it festers, it becomes a wound that does not heal because no one knows where the edges of it lie. And for those who live in the shadow of such absence, time does not move forward. It circles endlessly around the same questions. Years passed, and still the case remained untouched by clarity. Investigators moved on to newer files, fresher tragedies. The world found other stories to occupy its fear. But for the family, for the community, for anyone who had ever scrolled through Craigslist late at night with quiet trust in the strangers waiting there, the silence never ended. Every theory became both an answer and a curse. If it had been a robbery, perhaps there had been a moment of mercy, a chance that the encounter ended quickly. But if it had been predation, then the terror of that night would have lasted far longer, drawn out into something unthinkable. If it had been organized crime, then the disappearance was not an isolated act at all, but a single thread woven into a far larger net. Each possibility was unbearable, and yet each possibility felt true. What haunted people most was not the violence itself, but the ordinariness of the moment before it. The way he left his house with cash in his pocket, shoes laced, jacket by his side. The way he told his roommate he would be back before long. The way he sent a message, casual and calm. Here now. Looks fine. There was nothing ominous in his words. No warning, no sense of fear. Just the routine of an everyday exchange. It was that ordinariness that unsettled the most. Because if such horror could grow out of something so small, so routine, then it could happen to anyone. To any neighbor, to any friend, to any stranger who trusted too easily. Safety no longer felt like something solid. It felt fragile, brittle, waiting to crack beneath the weight of one wrong decision. Communities learned to look differently at Craigslist. Ads that once seemed harmless now looked like traps. The simplicity of a stranger's message began to feel like a mask. People deleted listings or else wrote them with guarded care, stripping out personal details, refusing to meet without a witness. And still the platform endured because human need endures. People still wanted couches, cars, jobs, opportunities, and they still believed, hoped, that the darkness that had taken one man would not reach for them. But silence spreads in ways unseen. And the silence of Craigslist became a silence that touched every corner of modern life. The reminder that every digital interaction, every promise exchanged through words on a screen carries with it the unknown. Who is the person on the other side? What lies behind the smile they offer? The kindness they type, the invitation they extend. The investigation remains open in name only. The family still holds vigils, their candles flickering in the night like small defiant stars. They speak his name into the air as though he might hear, as though he might follow the sound back to them. But the night offers nothing in return. No answers, no truth. Only silence, and silence in the end is the cruelest companion. It does not explain. It does not comfort. It does not close. It stretches onward year after year. An endless reminder that someone stepped into a parking lot one evening and vanished into a void that refuses to give him back. It leaves behind questions that echo louder than any answers could. Who wrote that ad? Was there ever truly a car? Was the man in the parking lot alone, or were others waiting in the dark? How many more ads like it have appeared since, disguised as bargains, as opportunities, as invitations to step out of safety and into silence? The truth may never come. And perhaps that is what makes the story endure. Because when horror has no ending, it does not fade. It waits, it lingers. It infects every corner of thought, reminding us that sometimes the greatest danger lies not in monsters lurking in the shadows, but in the strangers who smile too easily, who wait behind ordinary words, who erase themselves with precision once their purpose is done. And perhaps the most haunting question of all is this: how many others have disappeared the same way, unrecorded, unremarked upon, their stories buried beneath the endless turnover of digital ads, their absence hidden within a silence that no one has yet uncovered? Craigslist is still there. Its pages still scroll endlessly. The ads still come and go, ordinary as always. And somewhere among them, perhaps tonight, another meeting is being arranged. Another stranger is typing an address, offering a handshake, promising a deal too good to ignore. Somewhere, someone is walking toward that meeting, unaware that the silence which swallowed one man years ago has not ended. It waits, it always waits. So when you answer that message, when you agree to meet, when you step into the glow of a streetlight to find a stranger waiting with a smile, ask yourself, how well do you really know the person standing in front of you? And if the silence comes for you, who will be left to remember the sound of your voice?